This hour I want to talk about knife crime. The number of people cautioned or convicted for carrying knives in England and Wales has reached record levels. This is according to data from the Ministry of Justice. Over 14,000 offences in the year to September of last year. It's the highest in a decade. When possession offences involving other weapons are added, other than knives, the total was almost 22,300, the most since 2009. And it's been reported this week that Boris Johnson and the government will lead a new cabinet committee looking at ways to tackle crime. Now, we know that there has been, certainly in the Mayor's office here in London and in Scotland, it's deemed to have worked very well. There's been a shift towards a more public health approach rather than just a strictly criminal approach. I mean, the criminal justice system is inevitably and rightly going to have to be part of this. But the idea about future prevention, current, I suppose, on future prevention, is that you look at the wider pressures and impacts on the lives of people choosing to go into gangs or being forced into gangs or feeling they have no other choice than to go into gangs. There's all kinds of complex reasons for this. I mean, you know, the role of parents has to be central. The role of poverty has to be part of this, doesn't it? The housing that people have, the types of communities that people live in and what goes on in those communities, the security and safety in those communities. There's a cultural element to all of this sometimes, regardless of where you're talking about in the UK. So it isn't a straightforward policing issue. As many people have said, you cannot arrest your way out of this issue. But I want to know from you, in the communities that you live in, the places that you live in, if knife crime is a problem, if it is a threat to your child or to your life, what measures do you say would fix it, help it, alleviate it? What measures are you seeing? What efforts are you seeing that actually are working where you live? 0345 606 0973, the number. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. Siobhan Benita joins me, Mayor of London, for the 2020 Lib Dem candidate, and sat on the All-Party Youth Violence Commission. Good afternoon to you, Siobhan.
Good afternoon. Hello.
So we hear, you know, we've heard Sadiq Khan talk about it. We've heard that Boris Johnson's government is looking at a new cabinet committee to tackle knife crime. We know that it is a real blight on young people's lives and on certain communities. What's your diagnosis and prescription?
Well, I think you set it out really well in your introduction, actually, in that there are so many, I think, complex reasons why we have seen the rise in knife crime that we've seen. And they are absolutely to do with lots of things that are going on in young people's lives from a very early age. There are lots of people affected by trauma in one way or another, whether that's domestic abuse in the home, whether that's maybe coming into contact with people who themselves are suffering from addiction. Lots of things going on in a very early age. And I think in the past there would have been public services around that would have come in and supported those young people. And unfortunately, over the last few years, a lot of those public services have been removed, so there's not a support system for some of these young people, either in their homes or the public services coming in around them to take place of that. And then alongside that, we have a very aggressive and very violent illegal drugs market operating in the capital and across other areas of our country as well. So a lot of those young people are becoming incredibly vulnerable and are being exploited by that illegal drugs market. And I think the third big factor as well, in that there has been a breakdown in trust between some of our communities in London and police. So as we've kind of moved away from a model where we have fewer and fewer police at the heart of communities and people seeing them as a kind of police service that's on their side rather than a police force, then we don't have that level of trust. So even some people who are falling victim to serious crime, they're not coming forward and working with the police in the way that we would like them to be able to bring some of these people to justice.
And everything you've said, to my mind, adds up to the kind of, clearly it's not pervasive, it's not everywhere this, but there's a kind of disintegration of the warp and weave of things that makes a community thrive, or a child's life a thriving life.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I mean, the one thing, when people say to me, well, what's at the heart of your vision for what would you like to do? And I try and boil it down to, I would like every child in London to feel like they are wrapped with love and hope and opportunities. And some people say, well, that sounds really soft, and that's, how are you going to do that? Actually, surely that should be what we're aiming for. That there shouldn't be a child in London who feels either so scared that they themselves feel that their life is in danger, and to protect themselves they're reaching for a knife, or they feel like they can't see a clear route for them in terms of education and employment and opportunities. So actually going and becoming part of an illegal drugs gang, for example, that's offering them some quick money, becomes quite a logical choice for that young person. So we really do need to step back and look at this in the round. And I'm glad that people are taking up what's called the public health approach. Because as you say, it is that weaving all of these things together, and all these different organisations and public services, they need to come together.
Can we also talk about family? Because I grew up with 5 older brothers, and I know, and they were never in trouble with the police. And we had that warp and weave that I'm talking about. We were never well off, but we had both our parents living with us, working for us, supporting us, good schools, all that stuff, good stuff. And I know, don't you, when you look back, what built you, what helped you build a life, and that definitely helped me build a life. But we do have to talk about what is, I think, sometimes the elephant in the room, which is absent parents.
Yeah.
It's part of it, isn't it? It's part of it. I know that my brothers were not in trouble with the police for a combination of reasons, but one was called Mum and the other was called Dad, and they'd have had very different responses, and they both added up to don't even think about it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, a part of the work we did on the Youth Violence Commission, we did a survey of over 2,000 young people, and we actually asked them where they felt most safe, and we gave them a list of options, and one of them was in your home, one of them was at school, and there were several options. And I was incredibly sad when I think it was about 16% of the people who answered that survey, these are young people between the age of 8 and 24, said they didn't feel safe or safest in their own homes. So we absolutely know that there is something going on in the domestic environment of a lot of these young people. Whether that's absent parents, I think you're right. There is a conversation to be had, but the one thing I wouldn't want to say is that households with single parents are in some ways worse than others.
Neither would I. And but they can be under more pressure than others. That we can't get away from. Not least because whenever I talk about this, and I'm sure it'll happen this hour as well, people, young men in particular, ring and say, I got into a gang because my mum was working 3 jobs just to keep us afloat. Yeah. We never had any money. Yeah. We never had any nice things. Somebody came along and said, I'll give you $2,000 if you do this for me, blah, blah, blah. Of course I'm going to do it, So the poverty and the pressure of that kind of household has to be addressed.
I think that's right. I think it's whether that family unit, whatever that family unit looks like, it's whether it's functioning in a way that keeps that young person safe.
And if there is an absent father, just to respond to your single parent thing, if there is an absent father, well, if there is, you're not going to suddenly magic one up who can fix it,
Yeah, no, exactly. But what I would say there is, that's where in the past I think there would have been other public services. So there would have been youth centres. We don't have enough youth centres at all across London at the moment. I've got a 5-point plan that I've issued for how we would tackle knife crime. Very much at the heart of that, there's this vulnerable period after school between 4 and 6 p.m. when a lot of young children get exploited by organised criminal. We should be looking to open every single possible youth centre, church hall, any organisation that wants to help and volunteer in that period between 4 and 6 p.m. to keep our young people safe across London.
And can you will work with the government, will you? You will work with Sadiq Khan?
Absolutely. My one frustration is there has not been enough urgency on this. So it's good that we have a violence reduction unit in City Hall. It was something that I called for in the report I wrote for the Youth Violence Commission. But that violence reduction hasn't worked with the urgency that it needs to work. It's met 7 times since it was set up back in 2018. So on average, in between each meeting of that violence reduction unit, we've had another 20 murders in London. I want to see them meeting much more regularly. I want to see them talking about things like minimising school exclusions across London. They could be playing a real facilitating role and bringing people together to share good practice. There's a lot of schools who are looking at how you can actually make sure that you keep every single child included in the mainstream school, because we know there's a clear link between children that drop out of the mainstream system and then becoming vulnerable to knife crime and serious crime. There is so much more that we could be doing. And my frustration, unfortunately, under the current mayor is we just haven't seen the urgency that this needs. We all know it's going to take a long time, and this is, we need to put in place a long-term strategy. But we can be doing things now to actually stop the kind of surge that we're seeing. And we need to see a lot more urgency on that.
And we don't know yet what Boris Johnson's plan is. And I'm sure Priti Patel will be at the centre of it as well. But what do you want from them?
I want them to follow the evidence. My worry is that they will go down the kind of tough on crime but not tough on the causes of crime route. I think they will talk a lot about, maybe more stop and search that's not intelligence-led, for example. And actually what I would really like them to be doing is focus on the things that we know work. Let's get back to really early intervention, giving children those opportunities, giving them better alternatives from a really early age. And like you say, getting back to working with families. We used to have that when we had the vision of Sure Start under New Labour. I want us to get back to a vision like that, when we're saying the earlier that you can work with young people and families, the less likely you are to have young people being pulled into a life of serious violence.
Thank you very much for talking to us about this today. Thanks. That's Siobhan Benita, Mayor of London 2020 Lib Dem candidate, who sat on an all-party youth violence commission as well.